Well, you see, I was quite poor in my youth and in my old age. So I told my sons, well, you're going to have to find a trade. You're going to have to fend for yourself. I have no inheritance for you. So the four of them set out together, and they came to a crossroads, and they said to each other, well, we'll meet back here in 4 years, and then we'll go back to Dad, and we'll tell him what our trades are. And so my oldest son, he crept out, and he met a man on the road. The man said to him, well, what are you doing, sir? He said to him, well, my dad doesn't really have money for us, so I have to pick a trade. You could become a thief. Now, when I tell you that wasn't exactly what I wanted my son to do, I do mean that. However, he's a very good thief, and he hasn't met the gallows yet. My second son, though, he had this weird habit of looking at the sky. So when he went out walking, gazing at the sky, as he always did, and a man came up to him and said, well, what are you doing? Well, Dad doesn't have money for us, so I have to pick a trade. You could become a stargazer like me. I could be a stargazer. I think I could do that, yeah. Well, so my son, he became a stargazer. Again, not exactly what I would have liked my children to do, but he's not going to be hung. So, a stargazer, my second son is. And when he graduated from his apprenticeship, he was given a very small telescope. But with this telescope, he could see anything in the world, and nothing would ever block his sight. My third son, however, I'm very proud of my third son. He walked out and he went into the woods. And while he was in the woods, he found a hunter, and the hunter said to him, well, you could become a hunter like me. I could become a hunter like you. That's a good idea. I could be a great hunter. And you see, my son, he became a hunter. And when he finished his apprenticeship, he was given a bow. And with this bow, he would never miss any shot he fired. He could hit anything he wanted. And then there's my fourth son. You see, my fourth son, he was always a little bit of a pushover. So when he went out walking, he came across a man. The man said to him, well, what are you doing out here, son? Well, my dad doesn't have any money for us. And he's just really poor. So I pick a trade. I'm going out on my way to find a trade. You could become a tailor like me. Yeah, I do not want to become a tailor. That's just sitting all day and sewing. That is not something I want to do. Well, you'll be a very unique tailor. You see, we'll sew things that aren't just shoes and shirts. I guess I could be a tailor then. You see, and then my son, he became the world's best tailor, the most unique tailor. And when he finished his apprenticeship, he was given a very small needle, but with this needle, he could sew together anything and there'd be no seam. Be it steel or silk, he could sew it. You see, all of my sons, they came back together on their crossroads and they came home to me. And I said to them, well, sons, show me what you've learned. Tell me, how many eggs are in that egg nest? My second son, he looked up and he said, well, Dad, there's 5 eggs in there. All right, son number 1, go take the eggs. He climbed up the tree and he took the eggs out from under the bird without the bird knowing. He brought them back down, and I set them along the edges of a table and one in the center, and I said to my third son, shoot all the eggs with 1 arrow. He drew back his bow, and he shot all the eggs straight in the center with 1 arrow. And I said to my third son, well, sew them back together so that when they hatch, they'll be perfect. He pulled out his needle, and he started sewing the eggs together. All 5 of them, put them back together. And then my first son, he set them back in the tree, and when they hatched days later, they were perfect, save for a little red line on their neck from where they had been shot. I said to my sons, well, there isn't really a best trade here. I don't know what to tell you. I can't give anyone a prize. However, the king has lost his daughter, and if you could get her back, he promised you'd be able to marry her. And so my second son, he took out his telescope and he started looking around until he found her off in the distance with a dragon circling overhead on an island in the middle of the sea. And so they went to the king, they said to him, we found your daughter. She's on an island in the middle of the sea with a dragon. We need a ship to go get her. And so all 4 of my sons, they set out together to find this dragon in the middle of the sea and to get the maiden back. And so rowing out, they saw her and they said, well, the dragon's sleeping with its head on its lap. How are we going to get her back? My first son, he said, well, I will simply go steal her from the dragon. So he went out and he picked the maiden up, he brought her right back to the ship, and they were on their way home until the dragon woke up. And then, with the dragon flying over top of them, my third son drew his bow and he shot the dragon down. Unfortunately, it wasn't really thinking, and the dragon was directly above them, so it did fall on top of their boat and shatter it. So the 5 of them, now stranded at sea, had nothing but to hope that the tailor could fix things. So he started pulling the ship back together and sewing it together and pulling his siblings and the maiden back on the boat until he had put the ship back together as if it had never been broken, and they finally got home. The king said to them, "Well, I said that whoever saved my daughter could marry her. However, there are 4 of you. Fight amongst yourselves." "Well, I saw her first." Well, I stole her from the dragon. Well, I shot the dragon down. I fixed the boat. And so they continued to fight until the king stepped in again. "Well, you see, my daughter is in love with someone else, so I could give you all a piece of my kingdom and you could become lords, and my daughter could marry someone she loved." I think that would work. Yeah, I'd be okay with that. Yeah, I'd be cool with that. I could become a lord. And so you see all of my sons. They each got to be lord of their own set of kingdom, and now I'm well taken care of, which is a very good plus. They're all lords of their own kingdom. The king lost a chunk of his land, a very big chunk of his land that day. However, none of my sons had to marry a woman who didn't care for them, so I suppose things did work out in the end.